Hi there guys, if you followed the previous step you should be about here by now. Now don't worry if you don't have this slider on yet. Some of you didn't do that yet, we skipped that one, we'll come back to it a bit later. So if you don't have that, no worries, we'll skip straight past that and continue to the next bit. So first you need this little guy and this little guy, they might be a different color for you. You need two 6mm screws and another two. And another two, so you need 6 pieces of 6mm screws. Then you want to grab these switches. Now you can take the cable off. We won't need that for the moment. And you need to grab another one of those as well. So pick up this guy and you'll see there's a channel running through the plastic there. Now that is there to accommodate these little metal prongs on the bottom of that. So they should fit in there quite nicely. If you try and do it the other way, you'll see it doesn't really fit in there, a bit wobbly. So it should fit nice and snug. And you'll see there's that little right angle there, that's where the switch goes. And then the smooth side there is the opposite. So the switch on the side with the right angle. So grab your 6mm screw and screw them in. You might need to give it a bit of a push as you turn it the first time, but they should go in fairly easily. Now don't do it all the way, of course, until you've got your second screw in as well. Whoops. There we go. Now don't do these too tight. Once the head's all the way down and you can feel it start to get a bit harder, that's when you're there. Don't keep turning and turning and turning. Beauty. All right, now grab the other guy. Now pay close attention to the way the switch goes on. You don't want to put it in the wrong spot. It goes on the outside there, but with the switch pointing up and the plug on the inside. And you'll see the plug sits in the middle there. So another 6mm screw, and it goes through the PCB and into the plastic. So same as before, might have to give it a bit of a push to get it going to start off with. And just keep turning. Now, these are quite fragile, you may find the plastic breaks. If that happens, not much we can do about it, just keep going. Hopefully one screw will be enough to hold it, or maybe we can glue it or do something else later. But that's only if it does break. It'll probably be fine. But if it does, don't stress too much. Hey, soon you'll have a 3D printer, you can print any replacement parts for yourself. So that shouldn't wiggle. Yep, that's quite firm. Beautiful. Now grab another two 6mm screws and put them through the bottom here. And we're going to put the plug in there now. Not 100% necessary, we can do it later, but it's going to be easier if we do it now. And just thread it through that square hole there. So we're doing this now because it can be a bit awkward later once the motor and everything else is in the way. So now, this guy goes on there and you've got to line up these screws with those holes. Make sure it is lined up and you've got it as straight as possible. And then, once again, push and turn. Now don't screw all the way in. Do a little bit of one side, then a little bit of the other, then a little bit of the other, then a little bit of the other. You don't want to screw one side all the way in first, because then it'll go on a weird angle and it'll be quite hard. Go a little bit, little bit, little bit. One side, a little bit, just like that. And nearly in all the way. Lovely. So it should be nice and firm. Shouldn't wiggle around. Let's do the other guy. So he goes around to the back there, and you've got these two little holes right there. So 2 more 6mm screws. Poke those through. And make sure the switch is pointing into the machine. Get one screw in. Now don't do it all the way. You can see it can still wiggle a little bit, and that's so we can make sure the other one can actually reach the hole. And then he can go all the way in, and so can his mate. There we go. And when that slides back, it'll hit that switch. Now we don't need the wire on both of them, just keep the wire on that one for now. It is a bit of a pain having the wire hanging off, but it is a bit more tricky putting it on later. So now we're going to put our rods, our Z rods, which will go up and down. So you can tell these ones, they're the thick type, and they're quite long. You can see they're longer than the Y bed there. And one side is going to be a little bit tapered and rounded off, and the other side is like a sharp 90-degree angle. You want the rounded side. He's going to go down into these holes. So you want it nice and straight as you can get. And you might be able to just push down if you push hard enough. So try your best to do that. But if you can't, what you can do is if you've got one, grab a beautiful hammer like that, hold it nice and straight, and tap it in. And you'll feel it looks like to get a bit trickier. You can see it's not moving anymore. That's far enough. The sound might change a bit as well. Just don't bash it all the way through. Don't go nuts. Shouldn't take too much force. I'm going to grab the second one, the rounded side down. Make sure to hold it nice and straight. Now, you don't want it off at an angle like that. It definitely won't go in if it's like that. You definitely want it as straight as possible. And then away she goes. So please don't do this with anything like your best plates or cups or anything like that. If you don't have a hammer, try and find something nice and heavy and strong to do it. Do not use the motor. I did try doing that and I dented the motor and then it didn't turn anymore. So don't do that. So now grab two of these bearings, same as we used on the Y carriage, and just slide them onto there. So two on that side and two on the other side. Okay, next you need these two large pieces. You'll see there's two slots there. Those are to fit these guys. So they'll slide up and down on those, and two spots for cable ties, which will slide through just like that. So we spin this guy around and I'll show you the correct way to put these guys in. It's important we make sure they're going the right way. So the side here with the switch, the small part goes on that side. You'll see it's got this nut that goes to the right or towards the inside. And there's also that little hole for a screw that goes directly on the switch. So make sure all of that is the same as what you see here. Let me just grab a cable tie. Get these guys both lined up. And then slide it through. Bit awkward to do with one hand, but I'm sure you guys can manage it. So pull him nice and tight, and then grab the next one. Now you'll find if you put it through on an angle, it'll go straight through. So don't stress if that happens, just try again and keep it straight this time, horizontal. And then he'll go straight through and come out the other side. So tighten him. So he should slide up and down quite easily. Let's grab his friend. Now it's a mirror image with that nut. You see that nut always goes towards the inside and the top. So grab some more cable ties. And you'll see this one, that big hole, that's where a motor is going to go. It goes out to the right. So put through another cable tie. Tighten that one. I'll just say it one more time. Make really careful that you've done it the same way that I have. These really have to be put in the right way, or else you'll be taking them out again later and reorienting them. So they should both slide up and down quite easily. So let's look at the front again. You'll see there's these round channels. Now those are for these long rods. See, these are the 6mm rods. They're narrower than the other ones we've used so far. And now we want to grab 2 of these guys. You'll have 3, but we just want 2 for now. And these are the clamps which will hold those rods on. So you'll need 2 30mm screws and another 2 30mm screws. Those are your longest screws. And you want to screw them through the front of these and all the way through. Mine's a little bit easy here because I've already screwed these ones before. You'll probably have to get the screwdriver out. And just screw it all the way through. You can probably try something like that. But just get it all the way through. Alright, just finishing off that second one now. And what you want to do is slide that into those 2 holes. If it doesn't slide that easily, you might have to use a screwdriver, but these holes are pretty big. It should be able to be pushed through, but not all the way. Have them just sort of loose. You see there's a small gap there still. And you'll need a couple of these flanged nuts. And just turn the machine around so you can see. And we're just going to put these nuts on the end of those screws there. Don't make them tight, but just get them on far enough that they're not going to fall off. Oops, and I just lost that nut. Where'd it go? Right, I'll just grab out another one, I guess. And on the other side as well. Now you'll find for this final one, the one close to the switch, there's not that much extra space. You can see, for this last one, there's not that much extra space, so I'm going to use a regular nut for that, because the flange nut doesn't quite fit. There we go, so just spin that one on. Once again, none of these should be very tight. And now what we can do is start to slide this rod through. So slide it about halfway for now, not all the way through to the other side. If it's falling out, you can tighten those clamps just a little bit. Not so much that you can't move it, but you can clamp them enough so that they're not going to fall out. Then you want these 2 small bearings and slide them onto there. So 2 for that rod. Once you've got those on, now you can slide the rod all the way to the other side. And get it in behind that clamp. There you go, and we want it lined up on the left side, not on the right. So it should be enough to get all the way past that clamp though. Now for the other rod, same thing. 2 linear bearings, and then slide it in behind the clamp on the other side. Now once you've done that, you can go ahead and tighten these clamps. All the way, tight as you can get them. Because they've got that nut on the back, you don't really have to worry too much about overdoing it. So get them nice and tight. And the main thing is we don't want these rods sliding back and forth. Now this last one with the regular nut, you'll probably have to hold that nut a bit better because the flange nuts will grip on by themselves, but the regular nut you'll have to get your hand there and hold it, and it'll want to spin along with the nut, with the bolt, I should say. But there we go. That's done now. That should slide up and down pretty happily. Okay, but for now, we're going to slide him all the way off the top and put it aside for now. Probably could have done this in a different order, but I want you to grab a motor now, and that's going to go through the bottom there. Now, be careful with this plug, because we're going to put a wire in there later. You don't want it pointing against the walls. So make sure the plug is on a side where you've got some space to run the wire later. So hold him from underneath. And you need 4 6mm screws for this. So 6mm screws are your smallest ones. You see I'm not actually lined up with the hole there, so I'm going to have a look, and you can see the holes aren't there. So I'll move it around a little bit. Where are they? There we go. So now I can see the screw hole. Now I can put the screw in. You can see clearly here the other holes aren't lined up, which is why I'm not going to do this one too tight, because then I can tilt it a little bit, and now we're good. Now we can get the other screws in. So make sure all 4 are nice and tight. And then we're going to do the same thing with the other side. Make sure that plug is pointing inwards to the open area so we can get the wire in later. Line up those holes. Whoops. And that'll be 4 6mm screws. So grab these 2 couplers, and the way these guys work is they've got little screws in there. They're a bit tricky to see, but they are there. And the way they work is a shaft goes in one side about halfway through, and then you'll tighten these screws and they'll clamp down on that shaft and hold them together. And then you'll grab something else to go on the other side, tighten those 2 screws, and then you'll have them joined together. Coupled, that's why it's called a coupler. So what I want you to do with this guy is grab the screwdriver and make sure it fits in the hole. And not just fits in the hole, it has to actually fit that screw as well. So I'm going through this because I've had quite a few students have trouble with this. So it should fit in that little hex hole, and you can see as I tighten it, it pokes through into that hole in the middle. And that's what's going to clamp on to the shaft. So loosen that again. So he wants to go onto the motor like that. Now you want it lifted up about 1 centimeter, so that motor shaft only goes about halfway through. Yeah, so you should have a gap about 1 centimeter underneath. So get in there and tighten up that lower screw and his friend there. And when you turn that, you should feel the motor turning as well. And let's do the same thing with this side. Make sure, I'm just showing you here. You can see if the screw's already in, it won't go on at all. So if you have that trouble, just loosen that screw a little bit and he should slide on nicely. So tightening him up now. So make sure he spins and the motor spins and you can't jiggle them up and down. And then what we're going to do is put the Z carriage back on. So be gentle with this. So we want to slide it through these bearings, but if you force it, you can damage the bearings. And it won't go on unless it's straight. I'm just showing you these nuts here. That is, on the bottom, means we're upside down. So the right side, the smaller one, is above the switch. Make sure we've got that the right way around. The smaller part goes above the switch. Now don't force this one, like I said. Might take a little bit of jiggling. If it's at an angle at all, it won't go. So just jiggle it, straighten it, Just don't force it, because you can knock those little ball bearings out. And once you get it, it'll slide beautifully. There we go, nearly there. That's it. And it should slide very freely. So next, you want to get your threaded rods. I'm not sure how well it comes up on the camera, but this has a thread. It's like a giant bolt. And this one, don't force it through, because remember there's a nut there. Definitely don't force it. You want to spin it righty-tighty and get it all the way through. So just keep going, keep turning. It'll take a little while, but not too long. And soon you'll start to feel it hit the motor. I'm just going to turn that around so you guys can see what's happening there. You can see it's just above the coupler there. So we're going to turn it some more. And soon it'll make contact. There you go. You can see it's lifting up now because I'm hitting that motor and still spinning. So this is how the machine drives up and down. Now let's grab the other side and do that one too. So don't put force on this, like I said. You can actually damage those nuts. They're glued in and they can pop out if you're too rough with them. It's not an emergency if that does happen. We can always glue them back in, but better if we don't. So you'll see once this one bottoms out and I keep turning, now it goes up together. So we want to try and keep this roughly parallel. If one's up higher than the other, it won't turn as freely. So you can imagine a nut has to be pretty horizontal. If your nut's on an angle, it won't go nicely. So I've raised it up a bit just to get it out of the way. And now I can tighten these other screws on the coupler. And now you can see the whole thing turns together. So the threaded rod turns the coupler and turns the motor. And let's do that with his friend over here as well. There we go. So now when these motors spin, the threaded rods will spin and we can drive the carriage up and down. So you do want to keep it straight. Alright, so that should be quite firm now. It won't be able to slide up and down because we're on those threaded rods. So the smooth rods, they keep it traveling straight, and the threaded rods control the movement up and down. So that's that. So the next thing we want to do is put these bearings together, and we're going to do our X car, which goes left and right. So first we need to put a motor on here. So this guy goes in on a 45-degree angle, and we're going to have that plug on the left and pointing down. So you can imagine if we had it on this side, that wire's going to come out and be a bit in the way and look a bit ugly. So he's going to go like that. But before we put that on, we need to put the drive pulley on. So that's this guy here. He slides on there nicely. And what we're going to do is before we tighten these little screws, we need to lift it up just slightly. Just the tiniest bit. And that's just so it doesn't rub on the top of the motor and it can spin freely. So tighten those two guys. Make sure it's on nice and tight. And then we can put that in there. Now I'm going to turn it around so you guys can see a bit better as I do this. And you'll want 4 10mm screws. That's 10mm. I'll just put that on the screwdriver. Get this guy ready. And away we go. Alright, now that's nice and tight. What we're going to have is a belt going around that side and around to that side, all the way across. So what we need to do is make a pulley for this side, but we're going to make it adjustable so we can tighten it and loosen it. So let's make that now. So find this piece here. And you'll need to find this pulley. It's the toothed pulley. And that should be your last one. You need a 14mm screw. And that just bridges across perfectly. So make sure you've got the right one. You'll need a 30mm screw. So these are your longest screws. And one flanged nut. And before we do this, what I want to do is open up this hole a little bit because it's probably a little bit too small. And what we want is this screw to be able to push through quite easily. But because it's printed, one side will be a bit narrow, so just grab the screwdriver and jam it in there and spin it is a good way to do it. If you've got a drill, ask mum and dad if you can borrow that and use that. But otherwise, just get one size screwdriver, jam it in there and then turn it. Then get the next one bigger, push it in there, turn it. You'll have to be a bit rough with it. I'm going to get one bigger size now. Push it through as hard as you can and start to spin it, and that will open up that hole. And make sure you push it all the way through. Then finally, the screw should be able to go through quite easily. It should push through. So make sure you get that right before you move on to the next step. Otherwise, it's going to make it a bit trickier for yourself a bit later on. But when you've done that, take that 30mm screw and put it through the bottom of this guy here. This is called the idler, by the way, or the tensioner. So we put that through there. And then grab the pulley. That goes in the middle there. Try and line it up with the hole and then run through the 14mm screw. Now what you want to do with this one is screw it all the way through, but you don't want it tight. You just want it all the way in. So keep an eye on this side and you should see it just poking through. It should fit perfectly. Once you've got it there, you don't want to keep tightening because it'll prevent the pulley from spinning freely. So you can see that's just starting to poke through now. And that's what you want. So it should still spin. Just make sure it spins nicely. Perfect. And then what's going to happen is he's going to slide in there like that. And just put the nut on there so I don't lose it. And we'll come back to that later when we need it. So let's do that X car. You need this piece here. And you'll see there's those cylinder areas there which will go over the bearings. Let me turn the machine around so you can see a bit better. So be aware of the way I'm doing this because you don't want it done around the wrong way. So we're looking at the back at the moment. So run a cable tie through. You see there's a hole there at the back. And just give one cable tie for each bearing. Alright, now that should slide nicely when they're all on. And it shouldn't move forward and backwards, it should only move side to side. So let's give him a bit of a haircut. So now you want two 18mm screws. It's 18mm. And they'll screw in this hole just above those bearings. So you want to screw this guy all the way through until he touches your finger there. You don't want it poking out. You want it just reaching to the other side. Let me turn that around and see if I can show you what I mean. You can see it's just flush with the end of the hole there, but not poking out. So then do the same thing with his friend on the opposite side. There we go. Now once you've done that, you want to grab your belt. Now if you've done the bottom part, the wire carriage, you should only have one belt left. If you haven't done that, you should have two belts. You want the longer one for this part. This is our longer belt we're using now. grab yourself a cable tie and make a loop, but a fairly loose one. Now what we're going to do is loop we're going to loop the belt over this screw. Now the teeth side is pointing up on the way out there. What we want to do is loop it over and then get this cable tie on there holding it together. I know it's a bit difficult to see through my fingers at the moment, but I'll try and get you a close-up in a minute. And when you tighten that cable tie, you want it as close to the screw as possible. So that's going to hold the teeth together and prevent this belt coming undone. And you should be able to give that a good tug and it shouldn't come out. I'm just going to try and push that around to the side a little bit as well. And once we've done that, I'm going to feed the belt through and we want to put it around the motor. So be careful not to twist the belt. We need it to stay straight and flat all the way. So the tooth side goes over the motor. So over the motor and then back again. Let me get this tight and then show it to make a bit more sense then, I think. And remember, it has to go back around, behind. So you can see it goes from the carriage, around the motor, and then back again. And now with this end, what we're going to do is get our little idler, our tensioner, take that nut off, and feed the belt through. Whoops. So I'm putting it through the top, and the head of that screw is on the back, pointing towards the back of the machine. So you notice the way I've got that idler, you can't see the head of the screw because it's towards the back. Has to be that way so there's room for it. And then, let me try and get it in a way you guys can see as well. You can see how that works now. Try and get this through. If it is too tight, remember you can always loosen the clamp that's holding the rods in a little bit. Just like that. That'll just make it a bit easier to get this guy in. And if you can't get that with your fingers, just use a screwdriver. You need to make sure that bolt goes through the hole. And hopefully you opened up that hole enough earlier. Now don't make this all the way tight yet. So remember, the whole purpose of this thing is that we can use it to loosen and tighten the screw. I should say loosen and tighten the belt. So just like that. If I turn it around, you can see that screw head in the back. That should be all the way to the right. If it's fully tight, it will be all the way to the left. So that's the maximum we can tighten it. So we want it to start in this looser position as possible, so we've got room to tighten it later. And then we just need to do the same thing that we did on the other side. With this side, we need to loop that over and put a cable tie on it. So try and make this as tight as you can get it for now. It doesn't have to be super tight, but get as tight as you can. And then we can get a bit of a better view there for you guys. So then tighten that once again as close to the screw as you can get it. And now we've got a full loop. And I'm going to give that a good tug, just make sure it's tight enough. You do want to check that because you don't want to start up your machine later and the belt falls off straight away. And let me give that a bit of a haircut. Don't cut it all the way to the base. Leave yourself a couple of centimeters there. Just in case you ever have to take it off, you'll need something to hold on to tighten it. Right, now we've got the full loop. And it's a bit loose, you can see. But now we can tighten that nut, and that'll pull the tensioner to the left. When it's loose, it can be a bit fiddly. Once it's a little bit tight, the nut will work a bit better. But you can see now I'm sort of holding the screw and then tightening the nut, so it doesn't all turn at the same time. You just need to tighten that nut, and that will pull the tensioner across. See, it's still a bit loose. I think I can go tighter than that. Now, you should be able to do this with your fingers, but if you've got one, you can pull out your pliers and do it with that. But keep in mind, you don't want this super tight. We're not tightening a guitar string or anything here. You can see I've still got a lot of room to go with that. But that doesn't mean we need to use it all. Now it's getting better. So you can still have a little bit of up and down movement, that's fine. If you make it too tight, it's going to put a bit of extra stress on the machine, pulling the two sides together. So don't go crazy. And that's about what you want. So it can still move up and down a little bit. So you can still move up and down a little bit, but there's no slack. As soon as I pull it to the left, it moves left. As soon as I pull to the right, it moves right. That's what we want. And even the smallest movement of the motor will move it. There's no slack. Let's give those cable ties a bit of a haircut. And I just want to make sure it can move all the way to the left and all the way to the right. Because it's not quite going all the way there. My cable tie's in the way. So I'm just going to try and twist that up to the top a little bit so it's not smashing on the side. And there we go. I've got the full range of motion now. All right, so one last thing. We've got our last end stop. That should fit beautifully there. And you can see the X carriage will hit that. So you need two 6mm screws. And one will go in this side. And one in the other side. Alright, now we've pretty much finished the mechanical part of the machine at this point. That can move. If we powered the motors, we could drive that left and right. We could drive it up and down with these two motors. We could drive it forwards and backwards. We just need to plug in the electronics. And of course, finally we'll put the plastic squirter on the front as well. But that's all for the next time. We're very nearly done, so well done if you've managed to get this far, guys. Let's look forward to the next lesson. See you later.